and welcome back to this episode of Net DevOps Studios, where we're going to talk about NSO and how you can get started with it. Joining me today is Kevin Corbin. Kevin's a DevOps TSA, and you know what? I'm going to let Kevin do his own introduction. Kevin, say hello.
Hey, good morning, Hank. Hey guys, I'm Kevin Corbin. I'm a DevOps TSA at Cisco. I've been at Cisco about 10 years, and over the last 2 or 3 years, I've focused exclusively on programmability and APIs.
Excellent, thanks. And I asked Kevin to join me today so that we can talk a little bit about Cisco's Network Service Orchestrator, NSO. And we're going to start out with a section I'll call Busting Myths about NSO. So Kevin, I thought NSO was just for service providers.
Yeah, Hank. So in the early days, we acquired TailF, whose focus was almost exclusively on service providers. As we've kind of mainstreamed the technology within Cisco, we're starting to see that product as capable of solving challenges not only for service providers but enterprise customers and commercial customers as well. And part of that is in large part due to the fact that our enterprise and commercial customers are starting to look a lot like service providers in the way that they want to carry out their business.
That's a really good point. But isn't NSO really hard to get started with, like super complicated?
Well, NSO is a framework and a platform. And with any framework or platform, you can make it as complicated or as simple as possible. I think today what we want to show is how out of the box, without a large degree of customization, NSO can solve challenges for those enterprise and commercial customers.
I think it's a really good point. And so let's take a look at how these go through. And I think we're going to be leveraging one of DevNet's resources, DevNet Sandboxes, for some of our demos today. Why don't you tell us about what you've recently worked with our sandbox engineering team to pull together?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do was have a kind of a what I'll call a sandbox in a sandbox, which is, you know, without us being very prescriptive about what we assume the end user is going to want to do or what we force the end user to do, we wanted to have kind of a playground using technologies like Cisco Viral and some sauce that we put on top of it through some custom development to really give some flexibility to the end developer for them to tell us what they want and be able to do it rapidly.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and get started with the demos and get ourselves set up.
Absolutely. So you can see here, this is the icon of the sandbox, and you can see that I've currently got it reserved and that I'm VPN'd into the sandbox environment. One of the things that the sandbox environment provides is a dev tools box or a dev box, which I'm SSH'd into currently. So the way that we're going to start is by highlighting some of that special sauce that we put on top of it that we call Viral Utils. And what Viral Utils is a DevOps style CLI that allows me to quickly spin up and manage topologies that are running on Cisco Viral. So I'm going to start by looking at an online catalog of the sample topologies that are available to me. And for today's demo, we're going to just use a very simple 2-router topology. And so after I found the one that I want, and you can see, which ones are the most popular based upon the number of GitHub stars that they've received, I can actually launch them directly using a Viral Up workflow. So I'm going to say Viral Up on the 2iOS router topology. And it's going to do some things like localize that topology. Here we're running in the sandbox, so it's changing default gateways and DNS servers appropriately, as we would expect it to if the customer was running it in their own environment. From here I can have a look and just make sure that my nodes are actually starting up. You can see they're starting to launch but haven't booted yet. And I'm going to run this a couple more times to just wait for it to come up. Now, they will show active here. You can imagine that the routers are still booting up and posting. So we're gonna, I believe, cut here for just a second and wait for these nodes to come fully online.
We will, but before I do that cut and we wait for them to boot, you mentioned special sauce a couple of times, and I want to let everybody know that special sauce is not something that's only available inside of the sandboxes or only available for some of us engineers at Cisco. This Viral Utils packaging, the CLI for wrapping around Viral, is something that Kevin and a handful of other Cisco SEs actually made available as an open source set of command line tools inside of Python. And so if you just do a pip install Viral Utils, you can get access to all of these tools that we have. I think Kevin's brought up here on GitHub so we can take a look at what they look like here.
Yeah, Hank, you can see there's a kind of a wealth of different workflows that you can sort of make easier using this tool.
Yeah. And keep your eyes open for some other blog posts, learning labs specifically on viral utils. All right, we're going to cut for just a second while we wait for that viral sandbox to fully come up, and then we'll be back and dive deeper into these demos.
All right, Hank, so it looks like our nodes are up here now. And we can do, a couple things with the viral utils as well. I can SSH into nodes really quick just by name. And you can see that these are in fact devices. And I can look at running config and things like that. Now, for the purposes of our demo today, what we want to take advantage of is the fact that the dev box that we've mentioned a couple times has NSO already installed on it, and viral utils has the ability for us to quickly generate API calls into NSO, which will dynamically populate NSO devices via the ones that are launched from our simulation. So I'm going to say viral generate NSO, and this is going to push again those devices into NSO directly.
Excellent. And that's, I think, the first step when you work with NSO is actually getting your inventory put together. And there's lots of different ways you can populate the inventory for a real network or other types of labs, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it just doesn't make for very entertaining video if you watch me type in IP addresses and usernames and passwords and fumble over my keystrokes.
Absolutely. So that's a fair point. So we've got NSO up, we've got the pieces in there. What do we have now that we've got NSO connected to our network?
So out of the box, after you populate devices, you get a couple of interesting interfaces. The first one that we're just going to show here is the web UI. And the web UI has a couple of applications built into it that we'll talk about throughout the video today. But we're just going to double check and see, in fact, that our devices from our simulation are populated in NSO. And we're going to look at them and do a couple of quick operations. The first one we want to do is a sync from. And I think this is getting to what we want to highlight today. The first important differentiator of NSO versus other tools is that it gives me the ability as the administrator to sort of suck in the existing configuration off of my devices and start to automate from that point. A lot of other tool chains that you'll see out there will kind of rely on you to build up what the current state configuration is and then move forward in automation from there. Here, by doing a simple sync from operation, I've taken the entire configuration of the devices and stored that into NSO's configuration database, which is the second important piece for us to talk about. Now, NSO has this database that it maintains about what is the source of truth for how our network elements should be configured.
I think that's a really good point, is that idea of greenfield versus brownfield automation. This makes NSO really powerful when you have an existing network and you want to start adding automation to it. Sometimes we look at automation as an area that we start at a point in time on maybe a new data center, a new project. Here gives us the ability to start from whatever our current state currently is.
Absolutely. The second interface that I wanted to show is the command line interface. And in the command line interface, what's unique about this is that it's going to be a workflow that's very, very comfortable for our network engineers. This is very much like a Cisco CLI. I can do common commands like show running config. Now this show running config is going to represent not just one device, but all of the devices that are under management by NSO from a single CLI. And if you happen to not be a Cisco user and maybe something like a Juniper user, I can also tailor that CLI to something that you're more familiar with, which would be more like a Junos CLI. And you can see that I am not a Juniper guy, so I'm going to fumble here a little bit. But now this is representing Cisco devices as Juniper devices. And which brings us to another important point about NSO is that it's not just Cisco devices that this can manage. I can manage Juniper devices or Arista devices or even sort of ancillary services like IP address management systems or even virtual data centers in Amazon clouds if I would like.
Now that's really cool, and I love the idea of having a CLI across my entire network, and let's focus a little bit on what that gives us. What can I do with that CLI?
Well, you can add configuration just like you normally would. So I'm going to go into configuration mode here. There is one extra step versus a single device configuration, which is I have to tell it which device I want to configure. So I'm going to go into devices, device router 1, and I'm going to tell it that I want to be in config mode for that. And from here I can use normal commands like I would. I do have to prepend them with a NED type, which is a little bit out of scope for today, but I'm basically saying this is an iOS device and I want to add a username called Kevin and I'm going to set my password to Cisco. The next important thing that NSO brings to the table is the concept of a transaction. Everything that I do inside of a config session in NSO must be committed. Now that commit not only gives me the ability to push configuration to multiple devices in an atomic fashion, meaning it's all or nothing. If it errors on one of the devices, all of the devices roll back. But it also gives me the ability in the future to roll back that configuration change if I would like. So here I've pushed a configuration username and I can go into the device and we can verify that in fact that pushed out to the Cisco router that we were pushing the config to. So you can see here's my new username and password that's been created.
Now that's really neat, Kevin, and I'm a fan of the CLI as much as any other network engineer, but I'm in DevNet and we're all about APIs these days. The web GUI was nice, the CLI is awesome, but does NSO give me any kind of API I can use for the network?
Absolutely, and that's one of the great things about NSO is with these tool chains that we're comfortable with, like CLI and Web UI, we can get started very, very quickly. But as we advance in the use cases and automations that we want to run, you absolutely require things like APIs, and NSO absolutely provides that. I'm going to switch over to Postman here, and we're going to show you an example where I'm going to grab the running config of that device now from an API call into NSO. And of course,
I think you missed router 1 or router 2, right?
Oh yes, I did. Good call. See, Hank, you're an expert already.
Oh, once again, it's not router 0.
What did I do here? Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you, Hank.
I'm here to help, man. I'm here to help.
So you can see here that the workflow in a command line, I would type show running config devices device router 1, and in an API I'd do the exact same. So the workflow is exactly the same. If I wanted to look at, I believe I can do a username here as well, and we can see that we can't. Having trouble typing this morning. Yeah, this is going to have to get cut, man. Sorry. There's our user. So I can look at the usernames via API as well.
Excellent. Now that's really nice, and I think that's the piece that we're after inside of network automation and programmability is just easy, fast ways to get access to our network data no matter what type of interface we're after. I like the fact that NSO gives me a web GUI, a CLI, and an API all wrapped together in a very similar fashion. Let me ask you one more question. Now you showed us how with NSO I can go in and I've got the CLI or the API to configure my entire network. What about those cases where somebody goes out of band and goes all like cowboy network engineer and connects directly to a device and starts mucking around? Does NSO give me any kind of ability to control for something like that?
Sure, absolutely, Hank. So one of the things that is most common is as new tool sets are being adopted, old habits sort of die hard, and so you will get engineers that will still want to go in to the devices themselves and maybe add their own configuration here. So in this example, I'm going to add a user ID for you, Hank, and we'll give you the same password that we've used for our other accounts here. And you can see now, so we've pushed the configuration from the device, and since the CLI is here for me automatically, we'll just continue to use it. What I want to do now is I want to do a devices device router 1 check synchronization. This check sync is going to go out and it's going to interrogate the device that I've told it here, in this case router 1, and it's going to say, is the synchronization that NSO knows about the same as what's configured on the device? And you'll notice here that the result is that it's out of sync, and it's going to show us that it's also going to raise an alarm, which would be visible to the UI or from the CLI or APIs, and we could also expose that to other ITSM systems as well.
So now that it's out of sync, what if we wanted to make sure that they stayed in sync, right? The idea behind network automation is that we keep that single source of truth, and with something like NSO, we would want it to have the real single source of truth, right?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I want to do in that is say, okay, so now that we know that it's out of sync, a natural question is, well, what's different? So I've ran another command here, which is going to show me the comparison between the two configurations. And it's going to show me in a diff style output that in fact the device router 1 has a username called Hank that we don't know about. And so the administrator has the choice to say, do I want to take the NSO configuration and push it to the device, or what would be called a sync to operation, or do I want to accept this configuration even though it was maybe not made in the most proper manner? Do I want to accept this and say, okay, now this is the new golden config, and sync from that device into NSO's configuration database? In this particular instance, Hank, I don't really want you in fiddling with my boxes, so I'm going to go and I'm going to do a devices, device, router 1, sync to, and tell it that NSO is the single source of truth, and I don't want the username Hank to be on the router. So if we verify the device again, by doing a show run include username, you'll see that you no longer have an account on the device here.
You know, I can't say I blame you too much. I wouldn't want to give me an access to anybody else's devices either, so good call on that one. Now you did mention, as kind of we finish up on this, I love the CLI that it's there, but learning a new CLI might be a challenge. All of that config sync, the checking the status, looking at the diffs, that's all available in the web UI too, right?
100%, yep. The nice thing is that NSO provides a data model where one didn't exist before. And so all of these interfaces via the API, the CLI, or the web UI are all rendered dynamically off of that data model, which it represents the devices and the capabilities of those devices. So not only do you have the choice as an administrator of which user interface do you want, you have the ability to sort of step into advanced automation capabilities by maybe adopting something like the API interface into the device. As well as guaranteeing that if I can perform an operation from one of those interfaces, that same operation is available on the others as well.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're out of time for today's video. But Kevin, are you willing to come back, show me some more things about NSO? What's possible? Maybe how we can use it in more advanced workflows in future videos?
Absolutely, Hank. Anytime.
Excellent. All right. As we close down, let's review what we talked about. First, we've got a brand new DevNet sandbox available that gives you a sandbox inside of a sandbox where you can experiment with different topologies, platforms, and net DevOps workflows. You can combine iOS XE, XR, and XOS, as well as any other network platform that can run virtually on KVM, all within a single sandbox. And what about viral utils, huh? This new open source DevOps CLI for managing your network simulations? Well, it makes it as easy as viral up to get your network started. Simply pip install viral utils and check it out today with any viral server. And we can't forget about what we've seen with NSO. I'm so excited to learn more about what this platform offers for net DevOps engineering. A single platform I can use with my existing network, pull in and connect all of my current configurations for instant single source of truth. And then it gives me a single CLI and API across my entire network, multi-vendor at that. That's pretty awesome. Now, we've just scratched the surface with what's possible with NSO. Be on the lookout for future videos, blogs, learning labs, and so much more where we can dive deeper and learn what's possible. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks.